Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Joe Chappelle, and you're listening to episode 43 of the OBGYN podcast. Today, I have very special people with me to talk about what I think is very important to the future of OBGYN in this country. So before we get into that, let me introduce my guests. I have Dr. Jillian Kurtz. Welcome.
Hi, guys.
I have Dr. Sarah Kim.
Hello.
And last but not least, Dr. Jen Blaber is joining us again.
Hi, everyone.
So welcome, ladies. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode. I'm very, very excited about it. What we're talking about is the paper that was published in the Obstetrics and Gynecology Journal. I believe it was in September, 2018, and it was entitled The First National Summit on Women's Health, The Future of OBGYN Training. And that's a very long-winded way to say they want to talk about what is the current state of OBGYN residency and where do we go in the future. All right, so to jump right in today, the first thing I start with is what is the current state of OBGYN residency? And although most of our listeners are from the US, we do have a decent percentage of people who listen outside. So I kind of want to set the groundwork for how our training system works, because it's kind of unique around the world. Now, the first thing is that our medical schools are very expensive. Even the state schools are very expensive. Most OBGYNs or most medical students will graduate from medical school owing somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000. So that's a lot of money. For both places in the country, that is a mortgage on a house. Right? So it's about the same as buying a house. It's a lot of money. Then when they graduate, they go into either like a 3 to 6 year residency. Most are 3 or 4 or 5 years. And those residencies, they earn a decent living by most standards in most countries. They earn anywhere between $30,000 and $60,000 per year based on where they live and their year of residency. Here at Stony Brook, where Sarah and Jen and I trained, our salaries are one of the highest in the country. Of course, the cost of living is also very high here, so that goes into it. And one thing you have to keep in mind is that even though they're making a decent salary as far as standard living, $50,000, let's say, like I said, their debt is very high. And even if they're not paying that debt during residency, they're still accruing interest. So that's always something that is an issue. Now, from the hospital point of view, all of the salaries are paid by the U.S. government, and they're all part of Medicare. So that's important to understand. It really is a federally funded thing, and the hospitals don't put that much money into it. Again, at Stony Brook, our hospital puts a little bit more money into it than we get from Medicare just because we pay a higher amount and the standard of living is higher here. But for most hospitals, it's free labor. And so the incentive has always been from the beginning that this is almost like slave labor. And so residents in the U.S. usually work between 60 and 80 hours a week. I want to say they're treated poorly, but they're not really treated that well as far as what you consider from a labor relation point of view for most of the world. They're really used. And they form the linchpin for the patient care for many institutions. And even at a place like Stony Brook, which is one of the best places that I've worked, either as a medical student or anywhere else, there isn't a lot of support around the residents. The residents are really the front line for providing patient care. And that's true, of course, medicine or surgery or anywhere else. And so that kind of fundamental piece about how we train residents here and how they are paid for it really is going to become important when we talk about how do we change it. It really has a drastic effect. And the last part of that, the ramification, is that it is not necessarily a teaching program. It's not designed around formal education. It is designed around experience and clinical education. And that is also important when we start talking about faculty development and how we recruit faculty and what they do. So there's a lot of history that is kind of wrapped up in what we consider to be normal residency in this country. And I think that's going to become an issue. So I don't know, is there anything else you ladies want to add about residency and how you perceive it? Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? What do you guys think? So in an OBGYN residency, the core things that we need to learn, or I shouldn't say that because we're getting into what cores in a second, but the things that you generally need to get taught in OBGYN residency are general obstetrics, high-risk obstetrics, cesarean deliveries with also advanced cesarean deliveries at the higher level, which can be accreta or numerous repeats, things like that, fibroids, GYN oncology, both inpatient and outpatient, urogynecology, inpatient and outpatient, general gynecology, and by that I mean postmenopausal bleeding, vulvar dystrophies, menopause, contraception, all those sorts of things. Operative gynecology, whether it be hysteroscopies, laparoscopy for nexal masses, hysterectomies, and then also outpatient OB prenatal care. So there's a lot of things that we are really required to at least expose our residents to. And I should also say, I didn't say earlier about residency, is that our fellowships, of which the big ones are gynecology, urogynecology, MFM, which is high-risk obstetrics, and reproductive endocrinology, are 3 years. Typically, some of them are actually 4 years, but in general, they're 3 years. So if you want to do a specialty in the US, you're talking about 7 years of training, which I know for people who live in Europe, 7 years are like, okay, well, that sounds pretty normal to me, but it's a lot when you owe $300,000 as accruing interest over the course of 7 years. The one thing I didn't mention is REI, also something that I think a lot of residents get exposed to, although I don't know that most residents get good education in. And of course, all of these subspecialties really depend on where you train. If you train in someplace that has a great oncology program, you're going to get great oncology experience. If you train somewhere that has great REI, you're going to get that. If you train in someplace that doesn't have any of those great subspecialties, or they're all private practice, you may not get any education at all, except that you heard about it, and that's about it. And that really affects what fellowship you go into and things like that. So there's a lot of variety in OB-GYN residency, as are most residencies. They can be academic, like Stony Brook is. They can be super academic, like say Harvard or Johns Hopkins, or they can be a community program, which not to say they don't train them well, but there's definitely a different flavor for how you train. So there's a wide variety. So for those of you who are not from the US, that kind of gives you the basics of how we do things here. And so over the last 15 or 20 years, I think it's probably true across all countries, but especially true in the US right now, is there are a lot of changes going on, both in the makeup of OB-GYN's residency and post-residence, and also what we do as a field. And these are starting to give us questions about how do we train our residents? Are we just doing things the way we've always done that? Is that still accomplishing what we want to accomplish? And so these are a few of the things listed in the paper, and I'm going to ask you guys what you think. Anything else that we could add to this? Is the first one is a decreased exposure to hysterectomy. I think this is one that's felt by most programs. Not only has the overall rate of hysterectomy gone down, the mode of hysterectomy has dramatically changed in the last 15 years. I started residency 11 years ago, and I can tell you at Stony Brook, it is a sea change. When we were interns, second year, third years, we were all very anxious about getting enough laparoscopic and vaginal hysterectomies. And open hysterectomies, we had dime a dozen, and now our residents are graduating, and they're scrambling to get abdominal hysterectomies, and it's just unfathomable in a decade that we've had that change. And also overall, like I said, the overall number of hysterectomies going down, and that is really due to increased use of IUDs, the ablations, Listita, and other medical means, as well as things like we actually had a grand round the other day about IR embolization, which was really good, and that's becoming more advanced. Apparently, they're now doing that through the radial artery, which I find really impressive. Right. And at least at Stony Brook, we have one person who's doing same-day embolization, which is also amazing. So anyway, all these new techniques, and we are decreasing the number of hysterectomies, which is good for our patients, at least in the short term, but it's bad for educating residents who then may go on to do those hysterectomies. The next thing is an increase in subspecialization. In the last decade has been like a 10%, or actually a 100% increase. So it used to be around 10%, now it's almost 30%, it was 20%, now it's 30%. So a lot of our residents are going to subspecialties, which is decreasing the pool of generalists. But it's also saying, are we really using all that time well for that 30% is going into, say, MFM? Do they need to learn how to do hysterectomies? Or someone like Jillian's going to REI? Do you really need to learn all about oncology? No, actually, the REI is kind of the odd duck I was saying. Jillian disagreed, but I feel like it touches on all of those specialties. You have to know about myomectomies, you have to know about high-risk OB, you have to know about stuff like that. So that's a little different.
Right. Well, and since I'm currently doing like locums work right now, I'm reading these models and I'm like, oh, if I had gone through that model, that would not be an option for me. So we'll go into that a little bit in the future discussion.
Absolutely. Locums and the need that serves is actually a whole part of urbanization and ruralization of OBGYN, which is going to be key to this.
Right. Yeah, this paper made me feel guilty about going into a specialty.
No, we need you too, Jillian, okay?
But I also think another thing to point out is why residents are going to subspecialties. Sometimes I think residents go into it not feeling comfortable. Maybe, for instance, some people may just want more of a gynecologic focus, but I know there's some residents who go into, for instance, apply to MIGS fellowship because they don't feel comfortable doing laparoscopic hysterectomies right from the get-go, just graduating from residency. So they may potentially still like OB and want to be like a specialist and a generalist, but they may want to potentially go into MIGS fellowship, just have more exposure. And I think that kind of was also kind of touched upon by the paper, which shows that your surgical exposure in residency is not always, I guess, to the full potential.
No, that's entirely true. And we can probably later get into a conversation about MIGS and about the role of that fellowship, such as it is, and the future of OBGYN. So let's put a pin in that, and Dr. Blake will remind me to come back to that. The next thing, and these two things go together, is a change in gender composition of the field. And one of the things that was very striking is if you look at OBGYNs in their 60s, it's 2 to 1 male to female. If you look between 40 and 60, it's 1 to 2 male to female. So now the females have become more. And then if you look at under 30, it's 5 to 1. Right? So women are really just completely dominating this field, and I don't think anyone has to be told that that's true. We all know that's true. There's probably a lot of good that's coming out of that. But it does change the next thing, and that is this desire for work-life balance. And that's not necessarily just a female thing, it's maybe also a generational thing. But certainly those two things go together. And it's changing how much time do we want to spend doing residency. And then also, I don't mean just like years, I mean how many hours per week. But it also means how do I want to practice when I get out. More and more people don't want to work 60 to 80 hours a week after they get out for the next 40 years of their life. Like, that doesn't really work. And one thing I thought was interesting, and I never really thought of, but it's true, is that there are more and more 2 doctor families. And sure, if my wife didn't work and she was home all the time, I could work 80 hours a week. I wouldn't want to anyway to like see my family. But I could do that and it wouldn't be the end of the world. But if we're both working 80 hours a week, which is what we were doing in our practice together, that was really hard for us to have a family and do that. And so we were not looking for that. And I guess as more and more of those relationships occur, I think it's really pushing the field towards recognizing that and trying to make life and work better together.
That definitely weighed into my decision to go into fellowship.
Yeah, it's real hard. And then once you have a kid, it's almost impossible. You have to have somebody home at some point. And even if you have an au pair, they can't work 24/7, right? So it's very difficult. I have Dr. Ballas has had an au pair for a long time, and she's worked out well for them. And she was in residency, his wife was in residency, and he was working hard as go be. But they found it challenging too, and even she needs time off. So how do you arrange that? So that's coming into it. And the last thing is what Jillian was talking about is both the increased urbanization of the population, but also the practitioners. And that has a couple effects. One is it means that the people who work in urban environments have usually readily access to subspecialists. You can, at least on Long Island, you can throw a rock and hit a urogynecologist or a oncologist or a REI or MFM, right? But that's great for me, so I don't have to do all those things. I can offload some of that to the people, and that's nice. It also changes how I need to be trained if I'm going to work in that area. On the reverse of that, though, in the rural areas, we have less and less of those specialists. Now, the generalist who's working there really has to be a jack of all trades. They have to do that because they're the only ones there. So now how do we teach and train to both of those dichotomous positions at the same time? And that's going to be a challenge as well.
Yeah, so that's why I also thought having the definition of a core is is going to be difficult. And I know that's they touch upon that and how they need to define what the core curriculum is. But because it needs of depending where you are and where you want to go, and even your personal goals in life, I think defining the core curriculum is going to be in some ways different depending on geographically where you potentially may practice.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But you could train in Stony Brook. We have a resident now who wants to go back to rural Vermont eventually, right? So she's training in an urban environment, but she's not going to probably work in an urban environment,
right?
And conversely, we just hired a new attending here who spent probably 15 years working in rural New Hampshire, right? So she has a different skill set. She's not afraid of anything because she can handle anything. And so now she's on the other end. Now she's getting all the people who get transported to us from other places. But for 15 years, she was transporting out after she stabilized. So she was actually talking to me the other day about that, kind of reverse in her relationship with another institution. But I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely going to be a challenge. And actually gets into our next question is how can we be sure, and this comes to core, how can we be sure that generalists have a well-balanced education that enables them to practice quote unquote full scope, right? So what is full scope?
Well, what was your guys' opinion when it talks about whether an OBGYN should be considered a primary care physician? For many women, the only physician they see all year, they come for their annual exams and they don't go to any other. What is your guys' perspective? Do you feel comfortable being their primary care?
So this is something I feel pretty strongly about. I really dislike being someone's primary care physician, but at the same time, I understand that, and this goes back to the rural physicians where they won't have access to care otherwise. And so in those cases, I understand how important it is to take care of our patients. But for someone like me who practices in an urban setting, who has access to, a whole group of primary care physicians that aren't myself, I would rather not be included in that group.
I totally agree. I think it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I struggle with this one. I think as we have learned over the last 5 years at least, that breast exams are useless, pelvic exams are useless. So what are we doing? Right? As a gynecologist doing annual care, what are we really doing? Most of what we do is easily taken over by a primary care doctor, right? I mean, most of it is mental health screening. I'm not saying it is not important, by the way, but mental health screening, nutrition, exercise, diet, all sorts of things, cholesterol screening for people who need that. Even mammograms can be given out by a primary care doctor, right? So what are we adding as a profession to women's basic care, annual care? And I would say we're adding nothing. We're really adding nothing. And that makes me concerned. Maybe not concerned is the wrong word. I begin to question why we insert ourselves or we have inserted ourselves in that role if we're not adding any value. But I agree that there was a whole time in the 90s where we tried to become a primary care doctor, and that was really all for reimbursement. That was really had nothing to do with medicine. It had to do with primary care doctors being reimbursed better, and we wanted to be part of that. And that was it. And I think we backed ourselves into a corner. I would much rather be a referral person for recurrent vaginitis, for contraception, for pelvic masses, pelvic pain. I'd much rather do that. And I'm sure that there are other gynecologists out there in the world, or in the US at least, who love the primary care aspect of what they do, and that's fair. But as a profession, I'm a little nervous about that whole setup.
I was disappointed that the paper still towed the line on that one, that they were still seemingly in support of our role as primary care physicians. And I guess that has to do with them protecting the whole group of physicians who work in areas where they really are the only access to care.
So you're less cynical than I am. My feeling on that is, I don't know what the average age of the person on these committees were. But
I looked that up. Oh yeah, they're all older than we are.
Yeah, as far as I could tell, were there any residents or medical students represented at this summit at all? Because they didn't make mention of it.
Nope.
No. Right. Well, I mean, how big was
red flag to me.
There weren't really any young program directors either. Like it seemed like it were people in leadership roles for many years.
Right. As we know, the people who have the time to go to these meetings are the people who are not clinically that active. And the people who aren't clinically active are usually older. It's just the nature of these. If you look at hospital administration too, people in hospital administration and medicine stuff are usually older because those are the people who aren't working as hard clinically anymore. that's a different rant. That's one. I think that the age of these people is probably older, the average age at least, although I hope there were some younger people. And those people lived through this whole primary care switch back and forth, right? So they're probably more likely not to want to call it out as a mistake because they lived through it. Some of them may have actually been architects of it. The other thing is, it's hard, I don't know, if you're selling multivitamins, right, you're not going to tell people that multivitamins are useless to their health, right? Because you want them to buy your multivitamins, right? In fact, multivitamins are useless for your health and no one should take them, but you're not going to say that if you're selling them. Then same thing for OBGYN, right? How am I going to get people to come to my office every year if I tell them that what I do for them is useless, right? That's hard. Now, I'm saying all that not necessarily tongue-in-cheek, but a little bit because I think that if by just stopping being quote-unquote primary care providers, I think that we would end up sacrificing some things that we can anticipate. I think that there would be downstream effects of that are not good either. And so I'm not necessarily advocating for that, but I'm nervous about it.
But I think the nature of what an annual exam, I think we talked about before, if that changes and the expectation from the gynecologist, I think we could still see patients on an annual basis without necessarily being quoted as like a primary care physician. Because I think the paper also mentions that we're noticed as a primary care specialty, but if you have a focus on just reproductive health of women, and that's why women are seeking us, it's not necessarily like primary care in the sense of, I'm looking at your high blood pressure, your diabetes, or anything like that, but more of reproductive health of women's, more like women's health care. And I think women could still seek OBGYNs out for that aspect, but not necessarily be deemed as a primary care. So I think I saw kind of both sides where I also feel that my training doesn't really equip me to be a primary care physician, quote unquote, of kind of screening for diabetes, looking at people's blood pressures, but I do think it's valuable to see women potentially on an annual basis for education and reproductive health reasons. I don't know if that makes sense.
I'll definitely second that. I have made the annual visit something that I enjoy by picking and choosing things that are related to women's health as opposed to, all of the quality check marks of a, health screening visit. And so we'll discuss your, what's your sex life like? Are you having any dysfunction? What's your relationship like? Are you depressed? We'll go over all those things that I think, are important for women's health. And, we'll talk about vulvar health and, are you having any issues with pelvic pain? And those are things that I think that we as a field probably can do a little bit better than other primary care physicians.
Agreed. Absolutely. And I think what Sarah was getting at there is there's an aspect of primary care that we can fulfill without being primary care physicians with a capital PCP.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, that got us off track, but in the best way possible. So I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, we can actually do that one. Should everyone be trained the same? Maybe not, right? But then who do you choose who gets trained how? And that's, we'll get into our models in a few minutes. But the next one actually is the one that is more pressing to me is, let's say we make changes. Like I said, we'll go through them a little bit, but let's say we make them. Do we have faculty that can actually fill those educational roles? Because we're not trained that way. Like all of us, Jen and I are faculty now, Jillian and Sarah, you're going to be relatively soon. We weren't trained in what these models are going to be. So who is going to train the new people? Like we're not prepared, I don't think.
Well, even who's training the current people? I mean, I feel like the current faculty members are not taught how to be teachers. They're thrown into this role, and not every great surgeon makes for a great teacher, but all of a sudden they have residents and they're expected to know how to teach them.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a crisis in education right now. As it stands, we're having trouble accomplishing any of the newer educational objectives because we come from a system of see one, do one, teach one, as opposed to the newer educational models, which are much more reliant on competencies. Exactly, that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean that's a very important point. Like kind of back to what I was saying earlier is that residencies are not designed for that kind of teaching. They never have been. And I was going to come back to this later, but we can talk about it now. Is they talk about in the paper how do we incentivize for teaching, and for clinical stuff we have RVUs, which again if you're not from the US are relative value units. It's basically kind of equalize different kinds of work so you can compare them against each other. And then you can do productivity and you can bonus people or pay people based on productivity. And they want to make these EVUs or educational value units. And of course I love the part at the end of it where they say, yeah, but then the chair said there's no money for that, right? Because we don't get paid from Medicare or from a G&E level, nor from the insurance companies to provide education. Like we provide clinical activity.
But that's because the people we were educating were providing a service previously.
They still are.
Well, only sort of, right? Because they've taken duty hours and they've lessened them and they've put in all new kinds of educational protections for our residents such that they can't provide the same service that they used to. And so now we're actually needing to fill those gaps in service with other mid-levels or actually ourselves as faculty members. And so there isn't the same desire to teach that there was, I think.
Listen, you're talking to a guy who has burned out once, and is probably rapidly on his way to a second burnout. So we can only work so hard before we can't work any harder. It's just how it goes. And every hour or ounce of energy you put into clinical activity is an ounce of energy you don't have to put into education or research or something else. Our time and our energy is not an infinite resource. It's extremely finite, at least over the long term. Right? I think that's what they're getting at is you can't tie faculty to a clinical revenue model if you want them to educate. And it's not even just educate. Like it's not even giving a lecture. And you know this well, Jen, from helping design the FLS curriculum for the residents now. It's not even just giving the lecture about whatever surgical technique it is. It's actually designing that whole surgical curriculum, something that makes sense as a whole. That's going to get the residents where you think they need to be, and then it's testing them and it's making sure that what you did actually worked, and then modifying it. I mean, that takes so much brain space to do that. And if you're working 60 hours a week clinically and you have family at home, that's never going to happen.
Well, and if you, in order to your bills, you schedule 4 surgeries in the day, you have to move quickly in order to get those cases done, and you're less incentivized to allow the residents to participate in the surgery when you have them stacked back to back to back. So I think that's also a big challenge is giving the residents time in the OR to practice on your patients.
Yeah, I mean, you're not even you're taking a step further. You're saying, okay, so you quote unquote did 20 vaginal hysterectomies, but how many did you do?
Correct. You logged them all, right? But I mean, and if you look at the ACG minimum requirements for this year, for 2018, the requirement of abdominal hysterectomies was 35, and it's going down to like 15, I think.
Yeah, it's starting my year, abdominal hysterectomy count is 15 for a total of 85 hysterectomies. So the other 70 could come from anything else.
So just to give you guys an idea, like that's going down to diagesis levels.
Mm-hmm. Right. My year 15 was a vaginal hysterectomy number.
Right, but it's now abdominal hyst.
Right. And part of that is bowing to reality. Right? We do this all the time in our, we have monthly meetings for our administration stuff. We have this dashboard, and these things are like always red because we're never hitting the target. And at a certain point, you're like, okay, can we like take it off? Like we're never going to hit that. It's never going to be green. So maybe we should either just take it off and stop talking about it, or lower the target so that we hit the green, right? And that feels wrong. At the same time, if no programs, that tells you there that no programs are really hitting the abdominal hysterectomy, and so they felt compelled on a national level to drop it from 35 to 15. Like that's not 35 to 30. That's over half. Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't know that.
You got to think, I personally think I'm not going to feel comfortable doing an abdominal hysterectomy after doing, 15, but I guess, like I said, I'm going to log 15, but how much of those 15 have I really done? Did I do start to finish or just part of it? I just don't know if I'll feel comfortable leading, let's say, another resident when I'm attending through an abdominal hysterectomy, having done only 15.
And I would say that, at least at Stony Brook, and probably true for other academic programs like ours, is that most of those abdominal cases are going to come from oncology. And a lot of times those are not straightforward cases. So you can't take a ovarian debulking hysterectomy and equate that to doing a normal hysterectomy for fibroid. Those are not the same case, right? Or you're doing a hysterectomy on someone who's got a 36-week size uterus who is not a candidate for robotics, right? And that, again, is not a straightforward hysterectomy. So if you're not learning on the easy stuff, you can't do the hard stuff. So I agree with you on that. And then the last question I have before we get into our models, I guess our last two, the next one is, how does any change we make, this is not really a question we're going to answer right now, but how does any change we make in training, what effect does it have on the programs in the hospitals? Right, so some of these models are going to tell us that they want to change the number of years of residency, or they want to change how many per year, and that's fine. But what effect does it have on covering whatever responsibilities we have at the clinical level at each hospital? And if you're used to having 5 residents a year doing clinical activity all the time, and now we're down to 3 per year some years, like how do you still cover everything you need to cover? And I tell you, at Stony Brook, we run this all the time where we have somebody out doing whatever. We go global health, we go to Rwanda, and we lose somebody. And we say, okay, we're going to take away this our 12 to 12 person who does OB, or we're going to take away a person who's doing REI or family planning. And those residents are losing out on those experiences, which are not necessarily considered to be quote unquote core, but I think they're important, especially if you want people to go into global health or into family planning or something like that. You have to expose them to it. And so now we say, okay, we're going to change this, but now we're going to take away all these opportunities to do these interesting side things that are probably important to us as a profession. So I don't really have anything else to say about that, but I think we have to think about that as we think about the whole mess of changing things.
Actually, I was going to say, that was what I wrote next to the charts, at the table. That's kind of the figure. The paper is, there's no guarantee that it'll be balanced, especially for the model, one of the models where you're allowed to choose a track, obstetrics versus gynecology. Let's say you have 5 residents per class, and all 5 residents decide to go into gynecology track. Then who is covering obstetrics? Mm-hmm. Who's actually learning that? And also, I think a lot of these models are really geared and I guess better for residents who enter kind of knowing already what they want to do in terms of if they want to subspecialize or not, because it's kind of making you choose a track. But if you're someone who wants to do everything, it kind of makes it more difficult to do that, I think.
I think though for most of us, if you want to go into a subspecialty, you have to know by your intern or second year because you have to start doing research in that field and doing all that stuff anyway. So I don't know that it's that far off the mark from where we were all sort of expected to start thinking about it anyway.
And for me, as someone who wants to do subspecialize, I think the tracks are actually a good idea. But definitely there are people that I've spoken to who decided late third year that they actually want to subspecialize. And for those kind of cases, they were more exposed to it as they kind of advanced in their year. So I feel like those kind of people would have more difficulty potentially even thinking about subspecializing.
Well, I'm not as familiar with this, but in surgery, it seems like there are several ways to get to an endpoint sometimes. Those people who've chosen something very early on versus people who've come to that decision later. And I think that, with some of these track models, we could get to something similar to that system. And that might accomplish making all of those people have a place to go eventually. Ones who know what they want to do early and ones who need time.
I think, stick a pin in that for 1 second because that's an important thing. Last thing I want to talk to before we get to the models is surgical skills. And so one of the things is maybe instead of trying to blow up our entire residency system, if we're really just worried about surgical skills, maybe we should figure out ways to do that better without actually increasing our surgical volume. And this is something I wanted to ask Jen about because she's had some experience with this FLS program and resident education. Do you think that there's a way to use simulation or better didactics, or they even mentioned apprenticeship, which I think is kind of funny, is there a way we can educate residents without having 35 abdominal hysterectomies?
I don't think that simulation is the same as real life yet. And I think that there's something to be said for operating on live patients. And I'm not sure as a patient yet I would feel comfortable knowing that my physician trained solely on a simulator and then did a handful of cases before operating on me. I think that we're just not there yet.
I have to agree with that. I'm saying this from the perspective of the wife of a general surgeon who gets called in to assist in difficult, surgery cases. But we have a difficult time, I think, managing like postoperative complications sometimes. That's something a simulator is never going to teach you. So I think it can only go so far.
Yeah, my feeling was you can learn surgical skills, but not necessarily a surgery. If that makes sense.
And programs like FLS teach you skills that you can then use in surgical situations. But a good surgery is like a well-choreographed dance, and you have to anticipate the moves of your partner, and you can practice, but unless you really know where that plane is, or you can really see that next step, then you don't really know, you don't have the same level of expertise as someone who's done it 1,000 times.
I would say that judging from the success that the airline companies have had with training their pilots on simulators, that it can be done. But I think there's an order of magnitude difficulty in simulating an airplane, because they even have these things that are on hydraulics, and they go up and down, and they move as they move the controls, versus simulating a live person that you're putting a scalpel to.
There's also a difference in that that's a corporate environment, and there's a lot of money involved in training pilots because there's a lot of money to be had by flying people around the world. But even with FLS, it's a little bit like pulling teeth to get all the resources we need to get all the equipment just to train for these 5 tasks, let alone the fanciest simulators that are out there. And so, at the end of the day, maybe if everyone was exposed to the best simulators we have, but I think that with the resources that we have for education, that's not something that's possible right now.
I would argue that we probably have more money in medicine than they do in the airline company, the airline business. The difference, I think, maybe that it's concentrated in like 6 airlines. And probably only a few one regulatory body, whereas we are spread out amongst millions of different places and institutions and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's just a diffuse money as opposed to concentrated money. Not that makes your point any less valid. All right, so why don't we actually, I guess we're a little wise into this podcast. I guess we'll get into the actual meat of this. And they came up with 4 different models for how we could change residency education. The first one is, I like this one. The first one is don't change anything, which is fine. We have an oncologist at Stony Brook who always gives your options. And the first option is you can do nothing. Right? And so from that point of view, I kind of chuckle about that. So anyway, you can do nothing. But one thing is that you can do nothing, but you can change your credentialing. This is something that Jen and I have spoken about a lot, is how do we credential, especially for surgical procedures. And sure, everyone goes through their OB/GYN training, that's fine, but they get out, they come to a new hospital, and before you let them do a total laparoscopic hysterectomy, how do we credential them for that procedure? Or a cerclage, or a egg transfer? How do we do that, egg retrieval? Right, so that probably, even if we change models, probably has to be something that we start tackling as a specialty.
I feel like this one was just kind of a cop-out. Like, really, that's all we're going to do after we recognized all of these problems and all you want to do is change these competencies. I think not doing enough.
Yeah, I don't think it's a solution.
I think by itself it's not a solution, although I think that it has to be part of the solution for any of the other 3 models. And I hate to say it, but the cynic in me says that model 1 is probably what we're going to get.
I totally agree. The other ones are too difficult to implement, but we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Then for model 2, what they were talking about is a core for either 2 to 2.5 years, and I don't know why they do 2.5 years, but that's okay. And then for the second, basically the first half of residency is the same. Everyone does the same things. And then for the second half, the third and fourth year, or 1.5 to 2 years, you track into either OB, gynecology, or a comprehensive track. Which I guess just means that you do what we do now, right? Nothing changes. So you basically just get a choice at the beginning of your third year. If you decide you never want to do gynecology again, that you're only going to do OB, or let's say you're 100% sure that you're going to be a high-risk OB doctor, you're going to be MFM, that you could do that. Or if you know that you're going to do REI, or you know you're going to do oncology, that you could do that. I actually feel like you have very few takers of this. I don't think people would track that often. But I'd like to hear what you guys think.
Well, I actually like this model. I think Sarah touched on something that you have to know earlier on whether you were going to track, which I think could be problematic. But for me personally, I think it would be great to get a head start on the thing that I'm actually really interested in. I was feeling guilty when there were, forceps deliveries are kind of hard to come by. And so when I would get a forceps delivery, I would feel kind of guilty, like, oh, I'm not actually going to be delivering babies. Probably go towards somebody in a comprehensive track. If there was somebody who was going to be a generalist, we would funnel the cases to the appropriate person. So it wouldn't be also diluted out between everybody, but the pertinent cases would get to the people who,
So then when we're interviewing for residents, would we have to choose people for tracks so that we would know what our staffing would be like?
Right, like Sarah said, it would leave huge holes if the numbers didn't all balance out.
I understand what you're saying, Jillian. I just think that put yourself in your shoes. Maybe you're unique, or maybe not that unique. I'm wrong, but maybe you're unique in that from the time that you went to kindergarten, you knew you wanted to be an REI, and that's fine. But I think a lot of people, and Sarah, you're going through this right now, so maybe you can also say is you're at the end of your second year, and you're like, I'm like 99% sure that I want to be an oncologist, right? Like that's what I want to do. I want to be an REI. Are you 100% sure? And you're not going to do any OB for the last 2 years of your residency? Are you really going to make that commitment to not do OB anymore? That's my question. That's my concern. So I think honestly, what do you guys think?
I do think that would be a difficult decision to make at that point because I think I had a very good idea and I was starting the process in my intern year, but I never took the plunge until you have to in your third year. So if you were forced to commit earlier, I think that would be difficult.
And what about acceptance? What about acceptance to a fellowship track? Like are these guaranteed?
In this model, no. In this model, you apply to fellowship like you normally do. And that's my thing. So,
that's a good point.
But what if you've stopped doing the other things and then aren't successful at matching in a competitive fellowship?
Mm-hmm.
So then you haven't done obstetrics for 2 years and now all of a sudden you're not an oncologist. Oh, well.
But I think I agree with Jillian. When I first looked at the model, it was very appealing because as someone who wanted to do oncology, it was like, oh, clearly I would probably do the gynecology track, so I have more exposure to GYN surgery. But there's no guarantee that I'm going to match. There's no guarantee. And what if during the middle of the year you decide, maybe 3.5 years, oh my gosh, I actually don't want to do this. This is not right for me. As I'm doing more and more in gynecology, I realize I miss OB. Then can you go back to the comprehensive track? But now you have to extend your training because you missed 1.5 years of the comprehensive track. So you don't really graduate with the competencies that the whatever consensus group is going to actually say you have to graduate with. So I think in theory, this is a really great model, and I think this kind of stems from there's some talk that maybe OB and GYN should be 2 separate residencies. I know there's some talk about doing that, or some people have mentioned maybe that should be the case because they're so different. But in reality, if it is one residency, it's hard to actually say choose a track, and you're going to have balanced residents, a balanced program where you're going to have everyone covered, and everyone's going to be 100% sure this is what they want to do. So I think in theory it's attractive, but I think in reality, I don't know if it's going to play out well.
Yeah. By the way, when you're talking about covering things, your administrative chief resident, persona was coming out. I could see the,
Yeah, that's what I think about 24/7. So
we've all been there.
Yep. Yeah. Then, so let's go into Model 3. And Model 3 is basically similar to what we have now. Is you do PGY 1 through 3 as it currently exists. And then PGY 4, you would either start your fellowship, which of course means that you're applying for fellowship earlier than we do now. Right? You're applying a year earlier. But you either start your fellowship or you would do a chief year. And you would have one more year of OB/GYN residency like we do now. And this probably is the best compromise out of all these models, at least in my eyes. It does lead you into some holes. Like let's say this year in our class, 4 out of 5 of our residents are applying for fellowship chiefs. Let's say they were third years because it would be a year earlier. That means that next year we may have 1 fourth year resident, right? Instead of having 5. Right? Now, maybe we could redesign our residency programs that we're really only counting on those 3 years of residency. And one of the things they talk about is, sure, so we have 20 residents a year right now. If we get rid of that quote unquote fourth year, then we can add those 5 residents to our 1, 2, and 3 years. Right? And so we still have the same number of residents. So we still cover the same things that we want. And we don't necessarily count on that fourth year. And that fourth year.
Who wants a school bus full of interns?
I was going to say, I think at our program, the fourth years, all they do is focus on making sure the interns aren't doing anything dangerous. If there were no fourth years, who's going to supervise all those interns? It would have to be faculty members, which, as we discussed earlier, they're already spread too thin anyway. The faculty members don't want to supervise the interns.
Right. No, it's true. And honestly, if I had to teach an intern how to be an intern these days, I wouldn't do a very good job of it. I don't know how to discharge a patient anymore. I can probably muddle through it, but I can't do it efficiently. Right. And there's all these things about being an intern that have nothing to do with medicine, that have to do with just systems things, and I would be very ill-equipped to teach anybody. But I take your point. But I think eventually the third years would take that role, and we would just trust the third years, and then we get more experience. I don't know. I think that you could probably make that adjustment. I don't know that it would be an easy adjustment, but I feel like you could do it. Dr. Belabors, people at home can't see her face, but she does not seem impressed by that argument.
I have enough trouble controlling my 2 fellows, let alone the whole school bus full of interns.
Okay, fair enough.
I actually was about to say that in that instance, in an institution where there are a lot of fellows, the fellows could also play an integral role in kind of being the more chief resident role as well as a fellow. That would put more responsibility / work potentially for the fellows. But I did on the interview, I forget which program it was, but they had a model like that where the interns take GYN and oncology call as interns on nights, and the interns are the one that see the GYN consults, which is different from our institution. Stony Brook, which starts the second year, and the interns directly call the fellow, who kind of directly supervises the intern, and that definitely puts that. Right now the chief residents in Stony Brook kind of oversee the interns, but basically in that institution, the fellows kind of oversee the interns as they see the consult. So it could definitely kind of trickle down, and it may work in a place where maybe there are more fellows, per each subspecialty, and that may trickle down to maybe the third years taking more of a bigger role as well as if this were to kind of be the model that gets implemented over the years.
Yes, but it only works in places that have fellows.
Exactly.
Right, I'm in a community program and we don't have any fellows at all.
Right. So it wouldn't work, in our, I think for us, in the mixed department, we definitely have the fellows part of our resident education, but definitely, in oncology or gynecology, we don't have fellows there. So it's not going to work, but I think potentially in that specific institution, the third years did take on a more of a chief role starting third year.
Yeah. I'm not saying I like it, I'm just saying I think it's possible.
It's possible.
So the last model is PGY 1 through 3 again, but then they break it out into a PGY 4 or 5 that can be, and this is interesting, so you can do comprehensive again. So now in that sense, we're extending the residency by a year. Now it's 5-year residency. Or you can go into fellowship, and they actually integrate fellowship into these 2 years, 4 and 5, right? So you now have 2-year fellowships instead of 3-year fellowships. You can also probably put MIGs in there, some other things. But now we're decreasing the length of training from 7 years down to 5 years. And I think it's interesting, although I think that's a big contracture from 7 to 5, especially for some of these fellowships. I think there's a lot of learning you do in that 4th-year residency that you can't make up just by going to fellowship right away.
I agree. And I also think from a fellowship perspective, a lot of that time is to publish meaningful research. And that would be a lot more challenging to do, I think, in just 2 years. But I mean, I'm not yet a fellow, so I'd have to defer that.
You're right. And they do say there's an optional 6th year here. But I mean, I can't believe that any fellowship is going to voluntarily decrease their fellowship years from 3 to 2.
I mean, at least in oncology, I know most are trying to increase it from 3 to 4. So if you ask them to go from 3 to 2, I don't think they'll be happy to do that.
Yeah. So after going through those 4 models, I think I kind of got a consensus already, but going on the table here, what do you guys think the best model is? Let me start with you, Dr. Flipper.
Of all of these, I think it's going to have to be number 3. I think that's the best compromise.
Fair enough. And what about you, Dr. Kurtz?
I agree. I think number 3 is the best, but I think number 2 would be doable. 1 and 4, I think, are out the door to me.
Okay, Dr. Kim?
Yeah, I actually agree. Model 3 seems the most feasible, and seems like it's something that could happen. I feel like I said before, Model 1 is probably what is going to happen, but I feel like Model 3 is definitely a good compromise.
Yes, I did ask you which one you like best. Now which one you thought was most likely? Because I agree, Model 1 is probably most likely. I mean, the real issue here is that we're trying to, in a lot of these models, we're trying to put a Band-Aid over a broken system from a different era that no longer applies to how we practice medicine, right? It comes from a time when there were 20-year-old, mostly white guys who were either unmarried or if they were, their wife didn't work, who were home taking care of the house, right? I mean, that's from the 50s, that's the era. And we do not live nowhere near that era anymore, right? So, it's kind of seems impossible to blow up the whole thing and start over, which is why 3 kind of tracks me a little bit. I feel like we can kind of push ourselves in that direction without going too far. But at the same time, maybe we should just go big and just blow the whole thing up and suffer through a decade of turmoil and hopefully come out on the other side better than we are now. I don't think that's going to happen. But, sometimes there's an argument for that. It's painful, but at least you got somewhere. I mean, if we just make a little adjustment, in 10 years from now, probably be in the same spot that we're in now. Maybe a difference in the trade-offs.
I think that I'm not sure any of the 4 of the models are really blowing it up. Like, I don't think they really went big with any of these.
I would think 4 is a little, I guess to really blow it up would be what Sarah said, and that is to make separate OB and NGY residencies. That would really be blowing it up.
Right.
I mean, I think 4 comes the closest to blowing up, but
Lengthening, yeah.
But I think you're right. So I think we did a very nice job there of going through this paper and kind of the pros and cons and also kind of our experiences, so I really appreciate having you, the 3 of you here. But they're going to have, this is the first meeting of this, so presumably, if they call it the first, they're going to have a second and a third and fourth hopefully and kind of refine some of this stuff. So I think you guys mentioned earlier, but what do you think we should do different in the next time we have one of these meetings?
We need residents and medical students present. Like, this directly impacts them.
And beyond that, I mean, I finished residency 7 years ago, and I can't tell you what to be a resident anymore. I don't remember, right?
I also noticed there was no osteopathic organization represented, which, coming from an osteopathic program, it's largely community hospitals, which is, a very different structure than the academic setting. So I think that could be an additional perspective that's important.
I think actually, I hadn't even thought of that. Again, we don't have a lot of DO programs in Long Island. We have one, so it doesn't come that often for me. But you're absolutely right. If all we look at is the allopathic and the DO keep doing the same program that basically we're doing now, they don't change anything, well, then we're going to have 2 separate OB/GYN residency types. And then how do you apply for fellowship or anything else? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
Right. So you're absolutely right. So we definitely need representation. Although actually, I think they're talking about combining the DO and MD programs, right? That already happened?
It's happening. Like, every DO program is going through the process of getting ACG&E accredited at this point. But that is, in the context of these community programs, trying to fit into a different type of model. I still think having them present would be important.
Absolutely. And then definitely residents and medical students. I mean, even if it's just a couple, a token, it's someone to bring a different perspective, right? We talk about this representation in Congress and other places, right? If you have no minorities, you have no women in legislature, then you never hear that side of things. You never hear that opinion.
Right. Well, it literally made me laugh out loud when I was reading the paper. They were saying the importance of, clinical autonomy in the OR, and then the very next paragraph talked about online modules. And I was like, oh my gosh, you guys, online modules are not going to help us increase our surgical competency.
Absolutely. Exactly. So besides the 4 of us need to be at the next meeting, I guess. So we'll have a petition for that. Right? But definitely, if you're listening out there and you are involved in this in any way or you want to be involved, this is coming. This is a freight train. It's coming at us and there's going to be some kind of change. And so I think it behooves us all to get on the train as opposed to stay on the tracks. So, if you're interested, find out when the next meeting is and try to get to it because something's going to come. So with that, I want to say thank you to Dr. Blaber.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dr. Kurtz, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun as always.
And Dr. Kim, pleasure to have you on as always.
Thank you for having me again.
All right, so we'll wrap up this paper. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back in a couple weeks with a new episode.